I know from talking to you that that caucus is concerned about another matter of equal seriousness, a matter that goes directly to the door of the President of the United States. I wonder, Congressman John Schmitz, if you would comment on Red China, heroin, and the Nixon rule.
Oh, yes, thank you very much, Scott. If I might, before moving into that, gild the lily on revenue sharing, on John's explanation of revenue sharing, I'd just like to comment on this aspect, and that is that state and local governments, by statute or constitution, are not allowed to operate in the red. Only the federal government has the prerogative of operating in the red. When we have no revenue to share, revenue sharing becomes simply a device by which we share our ability to run into the red with those levels of government that do not have that ability to run into the red. We go further in the red and give the money to them. Now on narcotics or heroin and Red China, I serve on two committees, the Internal Security Committee, formerly the House Committee on Un-American Activities, and the Health and Environment Subcommittee of Interstate and Foreign Commerce Committee. In both these committees, we deal with the aspect of narcotics, in the obvious case in the Health Committee, and the aspect of narcotics used in subversion in the case of the Internal Security Committee. There is let's say, a blanket or a curtain drawn over the primary source of heroin in the world and in this country. You know, you can listen to TV, listen to a speech, or listen to any report from Congress, and you'll hear about the primary sources of heroin. First of all, most Americans I've found that I've talked to don't even know that heroin is derived from opium. If more people realize this, or if we call it opium, those who try to pull this curtain over the eyes of the American people as to the source would have a more difficult time, because opium just brings to mind China. And yet when the sources are listed, they'll be listed as Turkey, Mexico, Thailand, Burma, and Laos, and what they call the Golden Triangle down there. Now, periodically in our committee, in my committee work, we would get little bubbles coming to the surface of information. And as a matter of fact, there was even one government official who wrote a book on this subject, Harry Anslinger. And, but yet, it wasn't until a book was published by who is considered the most prominent Arab author, Mohammed Haikal, in which he quoted a 1956 conversation between Chow En-lai and President Nasser of Egypt, in which, and I'll try to recall the quote as best I can, in which he stated that the Western man brought opium to China. We're now sending it back to him, and we're saving the best for his troops. Now, this got several of us, or at least a couple of us on the committee, looking into this. And to make a long story short, here's what I found out when I finally got away from the curtain in Washington and went to Taipei to find out what was going on in China. I found this out, that in 1952, the Red Chinese had started an official program of poppy production to turn into opium, and thereby, and after that into morphine, and which is also derived from opium, and heroin. By the way, one of the bureaucrats in Washington, in answer to a question about Red China as a source of heroin or opium, stated that as far as they know, there is no official production of, or no official trade. The word official was used, and of course, excuse me, no, what was it? I'm trying to think of the exact words. No, illegal, that's what it was. No, illegal. And of course, it wasn't illegal at all. It was, we think of the narcotics as being illegal here. It was official, and therefore it wasn't illegal at all. But what they told me in Taipei was that they have about 1 million acres under production. Actually, they listed it 6 million MUs, MUs. I found an MU or a MU is about 1/6 of an American acre, about 1 million acres in production. in Red China. This has been under a program started in 1952. They listed, I was told, there were four reasons for this program, and they all boil down into two. One is to raise money, and one is to subvert. The subversion aspect breaks down into three: pay subversives, subvert nations, and specifically subvert enemy troops. By the way, there is going to be an article in the next issue of, in fact, one of the reasons I had to come up here to Boston, excuse me, Mrs. McKinney, it really isn't, I'm just kidding, is to deliver my manuscript, which is behind, on soul poison from Red China, New Proofs, in which we actually have some photographs of narcotics picked up, brand 999, which comes from Red China. And it's just that this is brushed over. It's brushed over that it comes from Red China. Even the Red Chinese, the nationalist Chinese told me that the Burmese opium is grown in Burma by tribes allied in the hinterlands, allied to the Red Chinese, and it is sent into Red China for processing or refinement and then back out through Burma again. Recently, at the rally on the 20th of May in Washington, the March for Victory, I had occasion to speak to a young girl by the name of Moonru Yuan, who had escaped, not through the usual way, through Hong Kong, but had escaped from Red China south through Yunnan province, which is the southernmost province, and it's the province that has most of those 1 million acres that they told me about in Taipei. She escaped through Yunnan province into Burma, and she told me that when she passed through Yunnan province, she witnessed these acres under production, and they were being cultivated by Red Chinese troops. So that's how official the program is. It is a program actually participated in by the troops. The Red Chinese are making approximately $800 million a year. They could make upwards of $10 billion a year. That's the potential if they put it all into heroin, and being what their program is, we can look forward to that. But the problem is, and as Paul Scott pointed out, when the president went to Red China, Henry Kissinger suggested that he didn't talk about narcotics, might rock the boat. And yet the president calls the narcotics problem the #1 domestic problem. But what we ought to realize is that the #1 domestic problem has as its core the hardcore narcotics, heroin, and heroin is part of our #1 international problem. And there's no doubt about it. You know, I've often said, and I could go on this subject, but I would like to say this, that the solution to the problems of our young people and to the nation as a whole is to get back to the very basics on which this nation was founded. At a God, Family, and Country rally, I don't have to remind you what those basic principles are. But if we can't get back to the Ten Commandments and the ethics that stem therefrom immediately, at least we ought to be able to alert our young people that narcotics traffic and that narcotics truck coming at them is being driven by the enemy. And their instinct for self-survival as an individual or collectively as a group or nation ought to lead them to reject this. You know, back during the Korean War, I was in the aftermath. I was teaching a course on communist indoctrination and brainwashing. We made a study of the captured Americans, and we found that the communists had a very difficult time, and they failed in brainwashing the Negro troops that they had captured. Oh, some of them had defected, but we wondered why. And in questioning them, they had a type of a common sense. And one of them put it succinctly for the others this way. They said, when asked why they didn't fall for the communist indoctrination from the enemy, they said, well, because they were the enemy. Now, if you apply that to narcotics, there's a very good reason for rejecting narcotics and heroin, because it comes from the enemy. Enemies don't want to do you any good. They're out to get you. It's as simple as that. But I might just conclude with this thought. Who's more to blame? The enemy that grows it and ships it to you, or your so-called friends that keep you from the knowledge that this is where it's coming from?